recording you because I don't want to miss anything.
Okay. We can take some pictures too if you like.
Yeah, already did.
Okay. So this is Atlantis. This shuttle first flew October 3rd, 1985, which is 33 years ago as of yesterday. First flight. It flew a number of 33 times.
Okay.
And it was the last shuttle to fly on July 8th, 2011, about 7 years ago. So this is the front of the ship. Now inside here is the pressure vessel where the crew lived. You had a flight deck up top and a mid deck in the middle. They call it the mid deck because under the mid deck floor there was a lot of plumbing and wiring, like underneath your house,
yeah,
you know, like a crawl space. And then so up front is the forward reaction control system.
Yeah.
And all those little holes are for thrusters. Yeah. So, and you have thrusters in the aft in the back as well. And the very front is your nose cone that was one of the hottest places. It was 3,000 degrees Fahrenheit. I have
During the entry?
Yes, that was the hottest, 3,000 degrees Fahrenheit. And then these two white little holes here would open up on orbit, and there were two cameras, and they looked at the stars, and they did alignment. And just like if you're on a ship, you have a sextant, you know, you can navigate by the stars. Well, that's one of the original ways how they navigated the ship before we had GPS and other things coming along. Remember, this was designed back in the 70s.
Yeah.
So
it's amazing.
Yeah.
It's beautiful.
So we have 6 windows up front, and they were numbered 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Then we had 2 looking up, we're 7 and 8. Then 2 more looking in the payload bay, we're 9 and 10. And the window here in the hatch was window 11. A lot of people didn't realize that was a window.
Oh yeah.
So this is where
I didn't notice.
So
it
this
was
is
a
where
window.
you got in and out of the ship. The hatch would open down like this.
Uh-huh.
And so you crawl out of it when you land. Now when you're at the pad, it opens like a door like this. And we had a little, we call it a die board, but it was a metal panel that you crawl in to get inside. And then right back here behind the hatch was where the potty was. Just one potty, male, female, both had to go there. They had a little curtain you could put across to give you a little bit of privacy.
Okay.
Up in front was the galley area where you make your food on this wall. And so you had 4 seats up on the flight deck. The commander was on this side, pilot on the other side, and 2 mission specialists would be sitting behind them. And those seats, the mission specialist seats, once they got in orbit, you could take up off the floor and fold them up and put them off to the side. In fact, downstairs, when you get down there, there's a mannequin in an orange suit sitting on a seat. That was one of the mission specialist seats. So you can see that when you go downstairs.
After the launch, how long does it take to get in orbit?
About 8.5 minutes.
8.5 minutes. And burns all the fuel.
Excuse me?
It burns all the fuel in 8.
Well, there's a little bit left over. But the solid rocket motors on the side fire for about 2 minutes and 10 seconds. And they have
they're very powerful.
Yes, they provide about 80% of the thrust to get you into orbit.
Okay.
So, and when you fire those, bam, you're going quick somewhere.
Solid fuel.
Solid fuel. So just to clear the launch tower, you're already going 100 miles an hour. It's only about a couple hundred feet. So really, boom, you go. So here is the airlock. And on top, the silver part is the docking system where they would dock.
Yeah.
And originally, we would dock with the Mir space station. Right, the Russian station. And it worked so well, that docking system, that we used it on the International Space Station as well.
Oh, cool. And this
this
is the famous Canada.
famous Canada arm. They're very
Yeah.
proud of their arm. They help fund it. That's why they get a little free advertisement. In fact, they're on the back of their $5 bill is a graphic picture of the arm that's up on the space station, the Canada Arm 2.
It's interesting the way that it holds the objects.
Right.
It's like a diaphragm. I don't know how
It's almost like a camera, the old
yeah,
camera
yeah,
lens.
the shutter. Yeah,
Right.
I saw.
Again,
I saw it
remember,
on
this
TV.
was designed back in the 70s,
Yeah.
a long time ago. So we have the arm, and its real name is the Remote Manipulator System, RMS, but because it works just like your arm, everyone calls it the arm. It has a shoulder joint down the bottom, an elbow joint up above us, and a wrist joint down there. There's a camera on the elbow and a camera on the wrist.
And if you have to take something to put in the cargo bay, you're gonna use this arm.
Right, it's like a crane system.
Yeah.
Take things in and out. So like when the Hubble flew,
Yeah.
we pulled that out, released it, opened up the solar arrays, and released it. Then we went up 5 more flights to do upgrades and
Yeah.
some repairs and
I remember
put
all
part
of
of-
this.
new cameras, new gyroscopes, batteries, so hardened solar arrays that would take more of a hit from micrometeorites. So that fit in the payload bay. The bay is 60 feet long by 15 feet wide. And then on the doors,
How much weight can it take?
up to about 50, depending on
On the orbit.
on the orbit. If it was equatorial launch, it would be up to about 50,000 pounds. If it was a high inclination orbit, basically towards the northeast, it would be about 35,000 pounds.
It's
The
a
shuttle
lot.
itself weighed about 200,000 pounds. So the first thing we do when we get to space is open the payload bay doors, because these silver panels are the radiators
Oh,
to
cool.
get rid of the excess heat. Now, once we get to space, the shuttle flips over and it goes upside down so that the radiators are facing away from the sun, so you get better heat transfer to get rid
Yeah.
of the excess heat.
Very clever.
And then we also flew the shuttle backwards. So you're flying upside down and backwards at 17,500 miles an hour. And we fly backwards. Basically, if you hit anything and going that fast, you could, damage your windows. In fact, there were several flights that had little dings in them just from being on orbit, either from launching or landing. So we had to change the outer panes of the windows on occasion when they had little hits. So we had the payload bay, and then, of course, we flew backwards again, because if something hit the engines, well, the engines have already done their job. They got you to orbit.
Yeah.
So if one of those get hit, well, that's okay. We come back down. And they had 2, we call them OMS pods, orbital maneuvering system. Engines will go, I'll show you those in a minute.
Yeah.
But those are what fire to slow
to
yourself a little bit down.
Slow down, and then you re-enter the
About an hour later.
an hour later.
Yep. So,
It takes longer to get back.
Takes a lot longer to get
Well-
back than it does to get to space.
Yeah.
right, because you have to
You have to get-
all that energy
you
that
get-
you put into the ship to get up.
You get to get rid of it in
Exactly.
a form of heat,
Right,
basically.
right,
Yes.
correct.
We
So-
trade altitude and velocity as energy on
Right.
the way down.
So so we start with 0 energy before we launch,
Yeah.
and you have to land and roll out to make it back to 0.
Yeah.
So when you come back through the atmosphere, you don't come straight down. You make like a skier coming down a slope. Exactly. You're a smart girl. Have you been here before? How do you know all this? Here, I'm gonna.
It's all on internet.
You okay?
Oh, thank you very
Now,
much.
here we got. Yeah, she's a smart girl.
Yeah, she is.
So, So the payload bay, again, you could fly basically anything that would
Fit in there.
fit in there and weigh less than 50,000 pounds for, again, an equatorial launch. And you could move up and down. There were latches that you could move up and down the payload bay sides. So I always describe this like an 18-wheeler truck. You have a cab up front for the crew,
Yeah.
and a trailer or the payload bay for your hardware. So you had to pay attention to the weight and CG of the ship. So a lot of the payloads were put towards the aft to balance out the load.
Center of gravity.
Right.
Yeah.
So
to keep it as low as possible.
Well, no, because when you launch into space, your thrust vector on your engines goes through the center of mass to push the vehicle in the direction you want it to go.
Oh, right.
So center of mass is very important.
Yeah. You don't want to tip over.
Don't want to tip over.
So when the arm is stowed, it's put in these manipulator hold down, so it lays down. But when you open doors,
just
then
like
you
the
put it
other
out.
one.
Yeah, these things here.
Right.
Oops. My light was working. Oh, my light died. No,
Oh,
there it is, right there. Those are pedestals. And the arm lays down in those cradles. Just like over there.
Yeah. And so we started flying the boom assembly after the Columbia accident, so that you would pick it up with the arm, and then you could scan the ship left to right, top to bottom, to make sure you had no damage
In the tiles.
in the
underneath.
tiles or anywhere on the ship.
All the thermal protection materials on the outside of the ship.
I was watching the
Yeah,
day.
top to bottom,
I
left to
was
right.
watching TV the day that the accident happened with the Columbia.
Yeah.
I was also watching Challenger.
Yeah,
Yeah.
1986.
I'm pretty old.
Yeah. So again, this is your
Yeah, we all
airlock.
are.
If you want to do a spacewalk, you would go inside with your spacesuits on, close all the hatches, decompress down to a vacuum, and then you can open up the aft hatch and go for a spacewalk. We also, with that silver docking mechanism, there's a hatch there. So once you dock, and make sure there's no leakage between the vehicle and the space station, then
You
you'd
can
open that
open it.
hatch to go back and forth. This is the wing leading edge. It's made of the same material as the nose cone, and
Yeah.
it sees over 3,000 degrees Fahrenheit. And that's what got hit when Columbia had a hole in the wing right in that
Yeah.
corner there. And he had 3,000 degree gases going into the wing. It's made out of aluminum, and aluminum melts at about 1,300 degrees Fahrenheit. You'll have to translate all these Fahrenheits and degrees
In degrees,
back
yeah.
to Celsius when you get home. I have it written down over there, but I don't have it in my head.
C by 5 equals F minus 32
Yeah.
by 9.
Yeah,
That's
well,
it.
that's easy for you to say. Now we got to figure it out.
Yeah.
So we have various thermal protection systems on the ship, depending on how hot it is, and they all have to be lightweight because every pound of space, if you add up all the costs, it's about $10,000 a pound.
Wow.
So even for water, a gallon of water weighs about 8 pounds. So that's $80,000 for a gallon of water. So we didn't fly much water to start off with because it weighs a lot. But we make water by the fuel cells that provide the power to the ship. There's 3 fuel cells on board, and you're mixing hydrogen and oxygen together.
You mix them,
And
produce energy, and
28 volt DC power, and
and the
when you mix
result is
hydrogen
water.
you get water. So we collect that water and put them in tanks up in the front. And so if you come over here, some of our food and our drink bags we had all the water taken out and vacuum sealed. And so when you get up on orbit, it's time to eat something. you'd stick a needle in here and squirt water, either hot or cold, depending on what kind of food it was. Or if you're having hot tea or cold tea, and you put a straw in here, and that's how you drink. Now, some food didn't take kindly to being dehydrated, so we flew different varieties. This is right off the shelf. These are snacks up here, cookies and peanuts and M&Ms, though we call them.
The most expensive M&Ms you can eat.
Yeah, well, not so bad. And Triscuit crackers. But we had all sorts of variety of things you could eat. But anything that we could rehydrate, save that weight. Plus it saves space of putting food inside the ship.
Weight,
because we didn't have a big walk-in pantry closet. It was all in little lockers with trays you pull out. So again, they had a variety of food they could choose from.
For gap between tiles and for step height differential.
So this is a sample of the gray material on the nose cone rings, the wings. It's carbon epoxy with carbon fibers mixed in, and it then vacuumed down very densely.
It's light.
Yeah, like I said, everything we try to keep light because every pound of space costs a lot of money. And over time, we a lot of things in the crew module, which is where I worked as a system engineer, we tried to reduce weight. So the original seats were like cast iron. The mission specialty seats weighed about 80 pounds each. Wow. They were and then we went to what we call lightweight seats that weighed about 40 pounds. So we saved 40 pounds a seat. And some of the stowage lockers, which were aluminum frame and honeycomb, we went to carbon fiber. And that
much lighter.
About half. Again, almost half the weight. So that's the hot. And so this is a tile, a sample. You can hold it, just don't squeeze it. See how light it is? It's mostly air.
Wow.
And every tile,
it's very light.
Yeah, every tile was custom built for each location. So there's over 24,000 tiles on the ship, and each of them has its own number that goes on it. And you can see on the wall here, this is a graphic, so all the numbers are the same, but on the ship, every number is different. And the little hole in the middle here, unless we had damage to the tile, the only thing we had to do to the tile service between flights, because they're mostly air, is put a waterproofing material squirted inside the tile, so when we go out to the pad and it rains, the water doesn't get inside the tile, which would make it heavy. Plus, when you launch and go to space, it would get cold and it would turn to ice and crack your tiles. So between every flight, we had to put a little, it was almost like Scotch Guard. You put on your upholstery. So you have tiles, 2,300 degrees Fahrenheit. Wow. The wing and the nose cone was 3,000 degrees Fahrenheit. As it gets a little cooler, you go up the sides. We could use blankets that are actually, per square footage, even lighter than tiles. So we put a lot of blankets on where we could. And it's a quartzite fabric with a fiberglass batting on the backside. And they'd see about 800 to 1,100 degrees Fahrenheit. And then when you get to the top of it, we use a Nomex felt with an elastomeric coating on top, and that was about 500 degrees Fahrenheit in those areas. So that's on top of the crew module, on top of the doors, on top of the wings, and that's, again, for return temperatures.
Like, for instance, if you look behind you, that's a replica.
Inside the payload bay, we also had some insulation just from being on orbit. So really, all the ship, just being in space, you're seeing about a 500 degree Fahrenheit swing from being in the sun
Yeah.
to going to the shade. And then the shade. Every 90 minutes, around the world, every 45 minutes, either a sunrise or a sunset.
And the whole shuttle has to support the stretching and heat and cold.
Right, right. So the whole ship is expanding contraction in space. And that was one of the issues, trying to get a tile, to stick to the ship. So, over time, these don't expand or contract. But you put them in aluminum, it's going. So it took a while to figure out what was the best way to put them on. We put a layer of RTV, which is stands for room temperature vulcanization. A fancy word. It says the adhesive dries at room temperature, but remains flexible. It's a silicone adhesive.
Okay.
So it remains flexible, so it can flex a little bit. Just one layer, though, wasn't good enough. So we had to add a second layer, and in between that, we put another piece of Nomex felt in between.
Olha como é leve.
Como é leves.
So you have one layer of adhesive here, then you have this, and then you have another layer of adhesive here, like this, and then that gave everyone just a little bit of flex, and then next one, a little bit of flex, a little bit of flex, a little bit of flex, and so that's how.
Like a puzzle.
Yeah, big puzzle.
Big puzzle.
And so that worked very well. Let's see what else. So I mentioned the potty real quick. This is a picture from on orbit. Can you see that okay?
Yeah.
In your camera?
Yeah. It's okay.
So here's your toilet seat right here. Towels off on the side. This way you can put your wet wipes or whatever. You didn't put stuff in the toilet. Because we didn't really flush it. And then in here you had stuff to use, accessories for the toilet, like wet wipes and plastic gloves if you needed them. Over here was we called it a cue card stuck on the wall that reminds you how to use the toilet. What lever to push. And
Checklist.
checklist, exactly. So let's go over here.
Let's go.
And those gyroscopes are how we point the telescope.
That's the end of the tour. So again, this is where we are. If you ever come back and see a launch, these are all the different launch pads we have now. And we're here right today. So on the bus tour, if you go on the bus tour later, they'll take you out around a couple of these pads, and you end up at the where the Saturn V rocket is up here.
Yeah, I definitely would like to see the Saturn V. The most powerful machine man has ever built.
So far, this one eventually, if things keep going the way they're going, that'll even have more power. That's the SLS rocket. It won't be flying for a few more years. This is another upgraded telescope. We have the Hubble telescope. There's a full-size mock-up over there, which is still in space. And do you know how long the Hubble telescope's been up there?
20 years, I don't know. Maybe 20 years.
More?
25 years. I'm getting very old.
It was launched in April of 1990.
I remember.
So it's been 28 years in space. Amazing. And a lot of people aren't even 28 years old, right?
I am way over.
Well, you look good. And do we now, as far as, shall we say, records? He had 28 years in orbit, right? So how many years have we had people living in space on the space station?
Let me think. The first space stations were
Not counting Mir, because that's gone.
Yeah,
We've had a presence on the space station.
30 years maybe.
Not that long. Come this November, next month, it'll be 18 years that people have been in orbit. So when I see kids come in that are under 18 years old, I go, you know, as long as you've been alive, we've had people living in space. Pretty amazing. So again, we have our launch schedule, and if you want to stay smart, this spaceflightnow.com website, you go on there and you can see launch videos and launch schedules and news of what's going on, not just here, but all around the world. So we have launches, you know, in China and India, Russia. Sorry, not Brazil.
No.
Not yet.
Not yet.
Not yet.
We've had I think we've had a Brazilian astronaut or two.
Yeah,
Yeah.
one.
Just one.
Marcos
Pontes.
Pontes.
Marco?
Marcos Pontes.
Pontes.
Yeah,
Did he fly in the shuttle?
yeah, he did.
Okay, I'll have to look that one up too myself. All right, so coming back to the back here. This is the servicing panel. This is how we loaded fuel, electrical connections prior to flight. Again, here's the OMS pod, Orbiter Maneuvering System pod. And these small nozzles here were what we fired to basically circularize your orbit in space once we're in there, or to adjust if we need it. And then also you have these thrusters here, and these little things we called stingers. Like, you know, back of a bee, you have a little stinger sticking out. Well, we had a stinger on this side and a stinger on the other side. Again, that helps you to dock, maneuver in space.
To turn upside down.
Yeah, right side up, side down,
No,
backwards, forward.
Propulsão que gira.
So then, we got the three main engines here that give you about 20% of the thrust, and all that fuel is in that big orange tank. And in the big orange tank, there's actually two tanks. An oxygen tank and a hydrogen tank. And again, the exhaust is oxygen and hydrogen equals
Water
right.
plus energy.
So when you're coming in for a landing and to come doing your S-curves through the atmosphere, you do have flaps and a body,
Just like
main
an
body
airplane.
flap
Like plane.
in the back.
Flaps.
Yeah. Again, you have all the tile on the ship. And on the bottom of the ship, again, is all covered with tiles. Each one built for that one location. If you can see closely enough, you'll see part numbers on the ship. And the tiles, you can tell the ones that have been on there a long time are sort of grayish. The ones that have been replaced, because of either a neck or some damage, you can see it, you know, a handful have been replaced. You know, here and there around, you know, around where the doors, those are the umbilical doors. Those were where the fuel went into from the tank through those doors there into some plumbing that fed your main engines. Right.
I used to fly the Atlantis in my iPhone. I had to land it. It took me a long time to perfect it.
Well, downstairs you can do that same thing. There's little consoles you can sit at to see if you can land the shuttle. Most people don't.
Let's see if I still have the hand of it.
So the one key is you have the hand control. Just move it a little bit, left and right up there. Don't slam it back and forth here.
Yeah.
So that's downstairs. You get to see that. So that's basically the orbiter Atlantis. Do you have any other questions?
I think you've answered all of them.
Oh, well, right, well, I'm going to give you a little souvenir to take home, each one of you.
Oh,
I'll
thank you
describe-
very much.
I'll describe it to you in just a sec.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
So it says Atlantis on the top, which was named after a sailing ship. All the orbiters were named after old sailing ships that did expeditions. This one, Atlantis, did oceanographic research for about 30 years. So that's where the name came from for Atlantis. 104, that number was what we called its tail number. It's not written on it, but all the paperwork we did, and a lot of the paperwork was handwritten back before we had word processors and everything, or typewriters even. So on the corner we'd put OV, Orbiter Vehicle 104. For Columbia it was OV 102. Discovery was 103, Endeavor was 105. Challenger had a number of OV99.
What about Enterprise?
And because originally Challenger was going to be a test vehicle, and so it didn't have a start with 100. Enterprise was supposed to be upgraded from a test vehicle to a flight vehicle, but they decided to just build Challenger as a flight vehicle and not try to retrofit Enterprise. So if you look on the far wall there, it'll describe where the names came from each of the ships and their numbers. You see where that orange mannequin? That's a mission specialist seat that he's sitting in. There's no labeling on it. I don't know why they never put a label on it, but that's that. And then, so here's the Earth and the shuttle going around. The Statue of Liberty, so Brazil, I'm sorry, it's down over here. Down there. Now, if you were from Europe, I go, oh, right across over here. On the back side is the last mission patch.
Okay.
Remember, every mission had a patch associated with it.
Yep.
And the crew members' names are around the edge. 4 crew member on the last flight. The date, July 8th, 2011, was the last flight of any shuttle, which was this one, just about 7 years ago. And the mission was called STS, Space Transportation System 135. It was the 135th mission. Atlantis flew 33 times over 26 years for this ship, but the whole program lasted 30 years. So, long time, you know, with a couple accidents and new technology. That's why it was slowly retired after we finished building the space station. And they're building new vehicles, a SpaceX vehicle, Atlas with a new capsule on top. Other missions will be going to the moon.
Maybe Mars.
Eventually to Mars, but there's a lot of hurdles to get to Mars. Because right now it's like 6 months each way, based on orbital mechanics. You'd be there for about a year, so you're talking 2 years. Where are you going to get your food and your water and then there's a big concern about radiation. Just going to the moon, you're in a lot more radiation than you're here on Earth, or even in low Earth orbit.
To make you have
So
cancer.
they have to have
and,
some ways to mitigate that radiation so you can stay up there longer. So, on your way down, you can crawl through that if you like. That's a mock-up station. You got to take your shoes off. There's a slide over here on the wall. You can go down that. It's like the angle the shuttle is coming in. And around the corner is the launch experience, where that sign is. You take a left right underneath that sign. And you have a little pre-launch, what happens just before launch with the engines and everything. And then you go inside, there's a ride, they lean you back, you're like in the ship going,
I'm gonna love it.
yeah. And that's what you're gonna do here. And then you go out through the gift shop there, and across the way is where the bus is. So, now you have a video.
Yeah, I do.
Now you can put it on YouTube.
I will.
Really?
Yeah, I will. Today.
Well, okay.
Look for your name.
Dave Andrews.
Dave Andrews.
Dave Andrews.
Can't,
Yeah.
you're not supposed to show my badge, but there.
Dave,
Okay.
it was a pleasure talking to you.
Likewise.